tonight we're having part of our recognition of the 250th anniversary of the United States with John Gately speaking. And just to let you know, Matty Sargent was going to join him, but he was mobilized by the Navy and will be away for at least 6 months. So John Gately is a very good sport for continuing the program without Matty's assistance. So John says he knows a fair amount of what Matty had done, but not all of it, and he doesn't have Matty's PowerPoint, so he's winging it. And I just want to thank him for doing that, but we kind of didn't think that we at this point had time to reschedule it, and we had to do that last month and decided we on with the show. The show must go on. So, and so John is second vice president of the Marl and curator at the Marlborough Historical Society, and he taught at the community college in Springfield for 38 years. So he's got some background here.
A little bit.
A little bit. So thank you, John.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, thanks for showing up. I'm going to be taking my glasses off and putting them on to read things. But I'm going to start by talking about a project that Matty and I and the Marlborough Historical Society just completed. We're putting up the first Revolutionary War monument to the people who died in from Marlborough and Hudson who died in the Revolutionary War. It's taken us more than a year to try and find these people. Some we found by accident. I found one today that I think was going to have to cross off. I think he's from Marlborough, Virginia. But I'll just read you off what we have for these people. We have a total of 15 right now. It may go down to 14, but every time we turn around, accidentally we find somebody. So the names that we're going to have on the monument, which will go in the, we call it the Henry Knox Park on Main Street in Marlborough. And it'll be, I guess, probably granite with a brass plate on it or bronze plate or something like that. So here are the names that we were able to find. Samuel Wyman, who died, he's the last one who died during the war, died on 17th of May, 1782. Moses Barnes died of wounds received in Cambridge on 2nd of March, 1781, which is late, I would think, to die in Cambridge. Let me see. Charles Hudson, probably an ancestor of Charles Hudson of Hudson of Marlborough, right? He was a friendly fire death.
Oh.
Yeah. Accidentally shot, 1781, that's late too. Silas Sawin, Colonel Bigelow's, died of disease, 1779. Prince Dima, Colonel Thomas Craft's artillery, died of disease, 1778. Jedediah Maynard, died of disease, June 1777. Ephraim Wilder, died of disease, December 1777. This is when smallpox and camp fever were going around in Boston and through the entire army, I guess. I guess one of the smartest things that Washington did was he had all of his troops, when they were continentalized, inoculated. And the British kept getting smallpox, but we didn't get as sick as they did. Let's see. Henry Woods, private. Colonel Morgan's rifleman, killed in action at Freeman's Farm, which is Saratoga, 1777. I think we're going to get rid of him. Can't find him anywhere in the records for Marlborough. And Colonel Morgan, Daniel Morgan, he was known for sharpshooters, and he recruited all of his men from western Pennsylvania, western Virginia, and other southern states because they had rifled guns. He didn't, you can't be a sharpshooter with a musket because it will go off about a half a mile and you won't hit anything. So I think we're going to look more into him, and we'll probably be getting rid of him. Eli Howe, We don't know. He died in the service, but we don't know how because a lot of these guys we don't have much information on. Francis Soames, his name is listed in Hudson's history that he died, but we don't know how or where. Abner Cranston, wasn't there a Joel Cranston? Yeah, I don't know if Abner would be one of his relations or ancestors. He died in 1777. Joel Barnard died of disease at Dorchester Heights. And the most famous one until recently was Jeduthun Alexander, who was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill on June 17, 1775. We actually named a baseball field after him. He shares it with Duke Farrell, the baseball player, but I mentioned Duke because he's one of my cousins. So, now here's one that I found totally by accident. And I'm going to go through how I found this, just so you can see what the process involved in putting this stuff together. Moses Roberts, he was in the 15th Mass Continental Regiment. He was first of all a Minuteman in Marlborough, starting in 1774. And that's how we found out who he was. He was killed in action at a famous battle down in Westchester County called the Young's House. Washington had set up a line of, call them?
Skirmish line?
Yes, well, it was more than, it was of houses or I don't know, what do you call them? More than foxholes. This was an actual brick house that they felt would withstand British trying to get through. And what Washington was doing, he was trying to keep the British on Long Island from getting up to where he was. And he set 5 forts, 2 on one side of the Hackensack River and 3, including Young's house, on the other side. And one night, the British showed up with, I think, 400 guys, something like that. And there were only a couple of Massachusetts regiments there, and obviously maybe some information I got, 1 New York regiment was there. So they got pretty well smacked around, and they had to leave. Then they captured it back later. But Moses was killed. I'll go a little bit more into him later. We found him by finding this book in my brother's library. He collected Revolutionary War stuff. And the first, it's called The Revolution Remembered, Eyewitness Accounts. The first one in it, the first chapter is New England in Arms. And it says Jonathan Brigham grew up in Marlborough, and he applied in 1829 for a pension. And he went on for 7 pages of legal-sized paper in small writing what he did during the war. And right at the beginning he says, I joined the militia in 1774 in the western part of Marlborough, and he was friends with Ephraim Barber, who was a clockmaker, a fairly famous clockmaker these days. He made tall case clocks. And my other friend was Moses Roberts, who was killed in Westchester in 1782. So we then started looking around, couldn't find anything about Moses Roberts. We found that there was a Roberts family, couldn't find anything else about him. Nobody had ever heard of him. And if you look in major history books about Youngstown, or look up the battle online, he's prominently mentioned, because he was killed rushing to try and stop the Hessians from coming into the encampment, something like that. I passed around, some people have it, the copy of a big tombstone. When the British and the Hessians left, they buried their own people and left the Americans there. The Americans came back and buried all the American dead. And in 1923, the DAR finally put up a monument. And then they moved them, but nobody knows whether the DR moved the bodies or not. But at least he has a tombstone. But again, we've never heard of this guy, and that's not unusual. Another one that I'll go into a little bit of detail with deals with this thing right here, Titus Harsham. He was a member of Colonel Crane's artillery. He died of disease in August of 1778. He was what they call a Mat Ross. It's the guy who scrubbed out the cannon. All right? And I'll go into a little bit more about him. He's kind of interesting. Think about his name, Titus. Is that a Yankee name? No. And Why is he not mentioned anywhere in Marlborough's history? Even when you look him up in the Massachusetts Sailors and Soldiers of the Revolution, his name is there, it says Marlborough, and that's it. No family, nothing like that. So we'll come back to him in a little bit. So there are 15, I think going down to 17, I'm down to 14, and we'll come back to a couple of those things. Now, how did I find some of these things out? Well, books like this. I have a big reference. My brother used to collect Revolutionary War stuff, so I have a big reference library of Revolutionary War books. And two of the guys that I'm going to be talking about went to Harvard, and there's a 19-volume set of Harvard graduates' biographies, and both of them are in volume 14. So I got information that I couldn't get elsewhere in here, and found out things about them that they probably wouldn't want us to know. So, all right. So let me go first to Jonathan Brigham, the guy who went everywhere, fought all the way through, well, I'll tell you where he fought through. His pension document is in the third person because they refer to him as the declarant, right? Declarant says, and then they put his words down. And it goes all through 7 pages of legal material. April 1774, he joined the Minutemen. We know that they met 2 days a week, and his companions included Ephraim Barber, a famous clockmaker, Moses Roberts, outside of Marlborough, Massachusetts, a famous soldier of the Revolution, and several other people. Early in 1775, we think that the war began at Concord and Lexington, but early in 1775, Colonel Cyprian Howe of Marlborough and 250 other people rode to Cambridge to force the Lieutenant Governor, Oliver, to resign. And there were 4,000 people outside his house in Cambridge, because what he had done was General Gage was sending people out to bring in all the ammunition, which was what Concord was about, right? But this is before that, earlier remember, he had sent the spies to Marlborough, and they ended up at Henry Barnes's house, and there was a big to-do about that. But, so anyway, they rode to Cambridge to force the governor to sign a paper that he would never do that again and to resign. They made him walk the gauntlet, and they didn't hit him, they just formed 4,000 guys, and he had to walk between them going, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and he was no longer the lieutenant governor. I'm kidding. Gage, what he had done was, Gage had sent to him, right across the river in Cambridge, General Gage, right, who was the military governor of Massachusetts, and told him that he wanted him to remove all the military stores and send them across the river to Boston. And he did it in the middle of the night, and the next day they went in to see if their stuff was there. It was all gone, and they knew who did it. So that's what happened to poor Lieutenant Governor. Later the same month, they went, I think a whole bunch of them, with Cyprian Howe, went to Berlin, because there was a colonel in Berlin, Colonel Bailey, I guess, must have been head of the resistance in Berlin, and there was a group of Tories, like a gang, that were going around beating up his house and all that type of stuff. So they went over there and chased them away. So that's before the 19th. And then finally on the 19th, they received the order to march to Concord and Lexington. He said he got the notice around 10 o'clock in the morning. It took them an hour and a half to get ready. And then I think we sent about 200 people. There would have been 4 companies of 50 guys apiece. And maybe we think there were other guys in a cavalry outfit from Westboro that would have gone with them. So probably 250 guys went from Marlborough. Of course, by the time they got 2 hours later to Concord and Lexington, there was nobody there except British bodies and the road, he says. So they followed those all the way up to Arlington and stopped there. And then the next day they joined the siege of Boston. This guy was in for 80 days. All of them had to stay there for 30 days, but he kept re-upping, and he was there for 80 days. The last 30 days of the 80 days, coincidentally here comes a name, Charles Hudson, remember the guy who was killed by friendly fire later? Well, he hired him to take his place. So Hudson stayed there, and evidently Hudson then, at the end of those 30 days, is when Washington formed the Continental Army, and Hudson probably joined one of the Continental services and ended up going down where he was killed. Okay, so this guy eventually moved to New York. I want to read two things from his little pension record here. Okay. The declarant heard of the affair of Lexington about 9 or 10 o'clock in the forenoon and arrived at Concord at a distance of about 16 miles, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When declarant arrived, the British had effected their object and were retreating, when declarant and his company immediately pursued. They could hear, as they advanced, various accounts of the retreating foe. Sometimes they were told they were nearly upon them and would then march upon a run for some distance till the accounts would induce them to believe that they could not be overtaken, and then we would resume our ordinary march. When in pursuit, they saw numbers of dead bodies as the enemy's retreat was harassed by yeomanry firing upon them, so forth and so on. And then they end up in Monotamy, which is Arlington today, and then they stayed in Cambridge for the siege. He also took part on the 17th of June, 1775. The declarant was engaged in the Battle of Bunker's Hill. The firing on the part of the British commenced at an early hour, so forth and so on. That's where Jettison Alexander was killed. Not on the hill, but
Breed's Hill.
all over the place. Yeah, it was Breed's Hill, but still. The awful solemnities of that day are still deeply impressed upon the declarant's mind, and scenes of carnage and death, an inconceivable grandeur of the immense volume of flames illuminating the battlefield from the burning of Charleston appear as vivid as if the events were yesterday. I was acquainted with every captain in the regiment who was in the battle. Now this is important. We sent a float into Boston for the Charlestown Bunker Hill Day Parade in Marlborough. We had this big, huge float, and it supposedly had the name of all the guys from Marlborough who fought in the battle. But as soon as we got that thing built, we got the float built, 2 days before we were doing research, we couldn't find who was in the Battle of Bunker Hill. There's no account of it, and we quickly looked it up on an official government thing, and they only listed 2 guys. So finally, I read this thing, and he says, he mentions all of the different companies that took part in the Battle of Bunker Hill from Artemus Ward's group, which included Captain Barnes of Marlborough's company. And we have a list of who was in Captain Barnes's, and it was the same list that we had put on that by mistake, right? So you find these things out kind of accidentally all the time. So, okay. So that's enough for Jonathan. But Jonathan kind of put me onto a couple of good clues here. And again, by accident, just picking up a book out of my brother's library and opening the first page. And, this is one of the guys from Marlborough who's world famous now because he wrote a pension thing in 1829. And he's very helpful to us. Let's see what I have next year. Oh, Moses Roberts, remember I said I couldn't find anything about him? And he's a big hero in Revolutionary War literature. Some of you have a copy of the headstone. As I said, it's been moved a couple of times, and we don't know if he's still there or not. Let's see. Again, no information about him. He's totally forgotten in Marlborough history. He's mentioned in articles all over the place. He was a Minuteman private in Ward's company, right, along with Ephraim and Jonathan. And then, let me see, in the militia for the he was in the Lexington Alarm, Bunker Hill, and the Siege of Boston. In the Continental Army that he joined right after that. Probably didn't want to come back to Marlborough because nobody knew who he was, I suppose. But he was a first lieutenant in the 15th Massachusetts Continental in 1777. And in 1779, he was made captain. And he was a captain when he was killed at Young's house on the 3rd of February, 1780. Now, there was something else that I want to tell you about him. Did anybody know who Isaac Van Wart is? Have you heard the name? Very strange. He's one of the New York militiamen who was down there. He and two friends around this time had done something that made George Washington very happy. You know who Benedict Arnold was? Remember what he was trying to do? He was trying to sell West Point to the British, and Major Andre was the British spy who was captured on his way back downriver to go and report to the British generals. Well, Isaac Van Wart was one of the guys who captured him, along with John Paulding, and I can't remember what the other guy's name was. And he knew Moses down in New York, in Westchester County. And he says, talks about the capture of Andre. And let's see, there's another one here. Let me find it. Kind of important. Well, I can't remember. So anyway, I have it memorized. He says, my grandfather, he's talking about his grandfather, Isaac, right? This is his grandson's writing memoirs of his great guy who helped capture Major Andre. And he says he knew Moses Roberts, and he says Moses Roberts told him that his grandfather had been killed in the old French War, which would be the French and Indian War, and that he was sure that he was going to suffer the same fate. And a couple of days later, he was killed, which is just kind of a little bit spooky. So, all right, so that's that guy. What am I going to do next? Jedithan Alexander, who's famous for being the first guy from Marlborough to die, we know not much about him. He was born in 1751. He married Kate Smith in 1774 on September 14th. His son, Jedithan Jr., was born on March 22nd, 1775. A little early, but back in those days, once you were engaged and you published your bands, it was okay to cohabitate and do whatever you wanted, because you would pledge to God that you were going to get married. The son was born on March 22nd, and he was killed on June 17th, 1775. So the baby was, what, 2 or 3 months old? Something like that. And there she is left. And that's all we have about him, except a baseball field named after him. Okay. Ephraim Barber, he was just a famous clockmaker from Marlborough. He's most famous. There are articles written about him all over the internet and in magazines about clocks. There's one article called Ephraim Barber Makes a Revolutionary Clock. And it has nothing to do with the Revolutionary War, but he made a tall case clock that on the face, they usually have a moon or something like that.
Yeah.
He put a ship in it. As the clock went back and forth, the ship went back and forth. He was a sergeant in Daniel Barnes's company at the Lexington Alarm and during the Siege of Boston. And then in 1777 and 78, we invaded Rhode Island. We tried to capture Rhode Island. It didn't work, unfortunately, but he was a first lieutenant by that time. He stayed in Marlborough for the rest of his life and died in 1832. So we were able to find him. Prince Dima, he's one of our dead guys, right? What do you think of that name, Prince? Who would be named Prince?
Haitians.
Huh?
Haitians.
A Haitian?
Yeah.
Well, you're close.
Port-au-Prince.
Yeah. Slave. Yeah. Prince Dima was a slave. He belonged to Henry Barnes.
Oh.
So that he was a slave in Marlborough. First of all, though, he and his mother, Daphne, we don't know if they were bought off the boat from Africa or whether they were inherited from somebody, but I was surprised to find out that he didn't go with her, because that was common law back then. When a mother, if a child slave was sold, he went with the mother. That's English common law. The calf goes with the cow. I hate to say it that way, but that's what the law says. So that somehow he ended up being bought by somebody else, and his profession as a slave was a sailor. which Matty doesn't know yet. He'll get all excited about that. Because it's one of the only Navy guys we have. He became a sailor. Yeah, but once when he came to visit his mother evidently, or somehow, the Barneses, Henry Barnes saw him drawing sketches. And they were very lifelike, so he said, oh, here, take a sketch of my aunt. And he did, and it was perfect. So he bought him. He figured he was going to make lots of money because the kid was going to be, well, he wasn't a kid, he was in his 20s, but he would be a great portrait painter. He took him to England in 1770, I believe. Yeah, he goes to England to study with a famous, or semi-famous English portraitist named Robert Edge Pine. He stayed with him for a year. He had him watch carefully, though. He didn't want him to escape, right? So, because it was slavery in 1770 was the Mansfield decision. No slaves in England at that point. So, so he took him back and he set him up in an apothecary shop in Boston, saying a very talented Negro young man will paint your portrait for such and so forth and so on. He thought he was going to make a lot of money on that. It didn't quite work that way because the Barneses had to leave Marlborough in a hurry, right? Once, I don't know if you know the story, Gage sent the spies through Marlborough. They took refuge in Barnes's house, and one of the other guys I'm going to talk about, Dr. Samuel Curtis, immediately followed them into the house and said, where are those guys who came into your house? Who are they? And Barnes says, I don't know what you're talking about. Right? He says, we saw them because all the Sons of Liberty are lined up outside his house on Main Street where the fire station is in Marlborough now. And he said, so his little daughter, Barnes's daughter, was there, and Dr. Curtis says, honey, who is that guy? Do you know that guy? Those two guys who just came into your house? He said, I asked Daddy, but Daddy said it's none of my business. So basically, they told him that one of the stories, I don't know if it's true or not, but I love it, if you don't get those two guys out of your house immediately, we're going to tar and feather your horse. So, well, anyway, he put them out the back door, and he sent them some back way. I think they went down to Sudbury and Weston maybe, and got back to Boston safe. But they had been sent out to scout all the roads to Worcester, the northern highway, which comes through Marlborough, and the southern one which goes through Westboro, I believe. They call them the upper and the lower Kings Road. So he left the next day to Hingham. And down in Hingham, they have these two portraits of Henry Barnes and Christian Barnes, his wife. And they were done by Prince Nemo. He did one of his, he also did paintings of the six daughters, but as I'll show you on Mrs. Barnes here, Continental soldiers, after he left, took over the house for a while when they were passing through town, and they knew who he was, so they destroyed the paintings of the daughters, and then they stabbed her with a bayonet. You can see the big cut through her chest here. And then Henry has a bullet hole right through his chest. But they survived, and they got down to the Hingham Museum. The Hingham Historical Society has these. Hingham Historical Society has these because Christian, the wife, had an aunt who lived there, and they took refuge there. And then when the evacuation day took place, was March 17th, 1776, right? And well, Prince didn't show up. He stayed here, and he joined the artillery in Boston. He too was a matros, scrubbing the thing out. He got sick and died about a couple of weeks after the other guy that I mentioned. What was it, Hudson, I think? So, yeah, so Prince. Why would you name a slave Prince? What does Prince usually mean?
Son of the king.
Son of the king. What's a slave? It's kind of ironic, making fun of him, isn't it, by calling him Prince? There were several famous princes in and around Boston. Prince Hall, I think, was the founder of Black Masonry, I believe. And there was another famous prince who fought at Bunker Hill. He's in the Trumbull's painting of the Battle of Bunker Hill. So that they would give fancy names to demean the slaves. So now, does the word Titus mean anything to you? Because there are, let me think, I think I have the list here. Well, when you think of Titus, Cato, Augustus, think of any Roman emperor you want, and they were popular names. Titus, when I looked up under known black soldiers of the Revolution in Massachusetts, I couldn't find this guy, but I did find a whole bunch of Tituses and Catos and Pompeys. Pompey wasn't an emperor, but he was like the greatest general in Roman history and all this. And there's nothing about him in Marlborough history. The only way we were able to verify him was, we didn't happen to have this document. We called the archives in Boston, and we have a guy there who does work for us. If you ever need to look something up, call me and I'll give you his name. He'll look the stuff up. He looked this up within 2 days and sent this to us, and it shows us that the second one down on the left is Titus Harthon, Matros of Marlborough, and Captain Walsh's company, so forth and so on, and it's got the date of his death on it someplace in here. And that's the only thing we know. He's not in the sailors and soldiers of Massachusetts in the Revolutionary War. He's not mentioned in Hudson or Bigelow. Nobody knows anything about him except from this one document out of all the archives that we have about the Revolutionary War. And I don't know, I can't prove that he's a black person, but I can't find any people in Hudson's history. The genealogy's in the back. I went through the whole thing. I couldn't find a Titus in there.
Was
It's
Titus
always,
a doctor, John?
Huh?
Titus was a doctor?
No, DR means, where is the DR?
Second block down on the left-hand side,
Right.
above the date 1779. It says
I'll
DR,
say DR.
Titus, Gotham.
That's how much money, a debit or something like that, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people, when they buy old account books, they say, oh, it's a doctor's account book, because it's got a CR on one side and DR on the other side. Creditor and debitor, whatever on the other side. And they pay lots of money for a grocery store account book or something like that. So, and again, we can't find anything about Titus. I think I have one more. Oh, yeah. This guy's totally by accident, too. I just, couldn't find any more accidentally, so I went online. I just typed Marlborough, Massachusetts, American Revolution, and the first name they came up with was Dr. Samuel Curtis of Marlborough. Curtis was born in Stoughton, attended Harvard, and luckily I was able to look him up in here, and he, as soon as he graduated, he came to Marlborough because Dr. Dexter had just died. He had been the doctor for years in Marlborough, and actually 2 guys showed up the same day in Marlborough, Dr. Cotting and Dr. Curtis, and so they both stayed in Marlborough. So Marlborough, from that point on, had 2 doctors or more. I think they had 3 at one point. So Curtis comes to Marlborough. He's married. He's got a bunch of, I think he's got 4 daughters. And then in 17, he's a very ardent son of liberty. He took part in all the, let's see,
Demonstrations?
no, well, there weren't many demonstrations because everybody in Marlborough was on that side, so they didn't
Yeah.
bother. But all the documents that they published, and the Sons of Liberty, the Committee of Correspondence. One of the guys that I left out was Edward Barnes. He was the other Harvard graduate, and he was the head of the Sons of Liberty in Marlborough. And he and Curtis and a bunch of other guys would have been outside. Well, actually, Samuel Curtis is the doctor that came into the house and said, "Where are those guys?" So he's right up front with what's going on. They think maybe he didn't join the militia, but they think maybe he showed up at the battles of Concord and Lexington, or, siege of Boston, maybe Bunker Hill, but they have no idea. He's back in Marlborough in 1774. Just before the war, his wife and 2 of his daughters die, and he becomes terribly despondent, I guess. So in 1777, he just picks up, goes to Boston, and he joins with a guy named John Manley. Anybody ever hear of him? No. Did we have a Navy back in those days? American Navy?
No.
No. Yes, we did.
Privateers, didn't we?
1776, Washington takes over, right?
Yeah.
And he notices that some of the powder that he's using was captured by pirates who gave it to the Americans, right? Well, another name for
Privateers.
pirates is privateers. And since Washington's in charge, he decides he's going to form his own navy. And what he could do is, there was this thing, I think they still have them, they call it letters of marque. And that's basically a license to be a pirate, only you're a government pirate. Some of us think all of the government are pirates, but we're not sure.
still have them.
He goes into Boston. John Manley has just got 3 privateers together to be a little squadron, and they were going to go around and just raid all the British ships going up to Canada, trying to bring supplies down to the British troops in Boston and Rhode Island.
West Indies.
Hmm?
In the West Indies, too.
Well, they went down to the West Indies once, but they didn't do too well.
Yeah.
They were doing better around New England. And remember, Washington doesn't want rum. We're making rum in Boston anyway for the soldiers. I have a broadside at home saying, we want you to reserve your rum for the soldiers. And we sent that out to every town. So I can understand that. So anyway, he goes into Boston. Manley has just formed this little group of privateers. The name of the flagship, with Manley in charge, is Washington has appointed him Commodore, right? Admiral, I guess, or something like that. Okay, so he's the Commodore. He signs on, he's the ship's surgeon. He goes on all the runnings around with Manley, taking care of people. They decide they're going to raid Halifax, Canada, which was not a great idea because they had I think they had 32 guns apiece on them. And they were confronted by a British man of war which had 40 on each side of the ship. So they had 80 guns, and they decided, what is it, discretion is the better part of valor. They surrendered, and they were brought into Halifax, and they were cooped up in almost the most miserable conditions of the war. Do you all know about New York and the prison ships? Yeah, I think about maybe between 12 and 20,000 American prisoners died in those ships. They would just take them into the harbor and they would cut off the masts of these old rotten ships and they'd use them as prisons. They didn't feed them. They didn't take care of them if they got sick. Every morning they would either throw the dead bodies over the thing, or once in a while they would, if they had enough of them, they'd send them on shore, and other prisoners would have to dig graves for them. One of the famous books, autobiographical books about the war, is The Jersey Captive, the guy who volunteered all the time to bury the bodies, and he was planning to get away, and he did get away, and he escaped and got back to the lines and finished out the war. So anyway, he's he's an officer, really. He's a surgeon. His friend that he went to college with, Edward Brooks, is the chaplain at that time. So they're considered officers, and they're suffering just as much as the common sailors. There were 280 of them in this little room up there in the summer. It's not great. And all of a sudden they start getting smallpox. He's a doctor. He said, well, to the British, let me start inoculating these guys. We don't want to lose everybody to smallpox. You know how virulent it is. And they said no. But more guys kept dying, so they finally allowed him, and he inoculated all the sailors, and obviously saved all their lives by doing that. While he's waiting to be exchanged, because he is an officer, he and Brooks, they get word that there are 2 lieutenants they captured down in Boston, and they had already agreed to exchange the 2 of them. Well, before that happened, the general down in, must have been Clinton by that time, General Clinton ordered that all the prisoners be sent down to New York, which would have been a death sentence if they had arrived there. They sent them down in 12 ships, and he had his 280 people from his ship on board his, and during a midnight storm, they revolted and took over the ship and sailed it into Marblehead, and he escaped. came back to Marlboro, married somebody else. Harvard book tells things I said sometimes they don't want said. In 1781, a terrible rumor went around this part of Massachusetts. He was having an adulterous affair with Mrs. Johnson. Poor Mrs. Johnson, she gets her name in history for that. But Harvard says they think that was probably just a rumor because in 1787 he had another child by the same wife that he was supposed to have been cheating on, and he just took it up the street to the Congregational Church and they baptized it. So that it probably was not a true story. 1787, he was sick of Marlboro evidently. He moved up to Goffstown, New Hampshire, and he opened a grog shop. Cash only. And he stayed up there until he died. So I think that's pretty much it. Do I have one more? I don't think I do. No. I'm going to donate this to you. This is a woman from the Historical Society, Florence Williams, wrote a history of Marlboro during the Revolutionary War. And she just kind of went through Hudson and Bigelow and wrote down all the things. Like 1875, there was an epidemic in Marlboro. 78 children died. It's amazing. And she figures out, based on the number of people who served in the war, which would have been about 400, maybe not that many. But anyway, she said Marlboro contained 1,300 people back then, and that would have been 1 out of 7 people would have served in the Revolutionary War.
What year was that? What year was that?
I think it was 75. Let me see.
So Hudson was separate then.
Yeah, well, the other interesting, the Edward Barnes I was going to read, I didn't. He was responsible for, on January 1st, 1773, that's 3 years before the Declaration of Independence, he and a committee of 5 other men from Marlboro drafted a set of resolutions for the Committee of Correspondence in Boston. Among them were, all men are created equal. And I looked it up, and that says, no men should be slaves. That's the way the thing begins. And he goes on to say, all men are created equal after that. Mankind has a right to govern themselves. Men have a right to religious freedom. They have a right to appoint their own leaders of government, and they have a right to bear arms to defend themselves. That's 3 years before the Declaration. And little Marlboro's sending out these messages all over the place. So, and she's got other great stuff in here too, just about the Revolution, so I'll donate that.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. All right, so I think that should be it. Any questions you have, I'll take any questions. And it's kind of sketchy, but again, half of these people we've never heard of. A couple of them we found out, I didn't talk about them, I think Maddie was going to do them, but you would go through all the genealogies in Hudson, which is pretty tedious. I did that with Titus, and I did that just going through looking for guys who were killed, because once in a while Hudson would say, this person was killed in such and such a battle or something like that. That's how we found Charles Hudson, because under the Hudson family, which I guess was pretty prominent, they said, oh yeah, he was killed. The other funny thing about that I did find about Edward Barnes, I shouldn't have, I guess I skipped, but Edward Barnes went to Harvard, okay? And Harvard biography says it was paid for by his uncle, Henry Barnes. That has been totally wiped out of Marlboro history when Hudson did it. And Hudson has a little footnote, actually a long footnote about the Barnes family in Marlboro. Oh, we don't think they were related at all, and so forth and so on. Well, why would he pay for this kid to go to Harvard? Yeah, it's kind of crazy. The other good thing about about Edward Barnes was he was humiliated at Harvard freshman year for playing cards. He had to stand up in front of the entire chapel and tell them how sorry he was for playing cards. But he turned out all right. He held every office in Marlboro, Massachusetts. He ended up as Justice of the Peace in 1799. He died much later, and he was Justice of the Peace for the rest of his life. So, okay, so any questions? I won't go any further.
Do you know where the any of them are buried? There's a burial ground around the back of the old Marlboro High School. Are any of them?
I don't think any. I figure a lot of these guys got killed. Jedith and Alexander killed in Charlestown Neck, or Cambridge, East Cambridge. He's buried right there where he fell. That was what they did back then. Even Joseph Warren, he was the general, the head of the people at Bunker Hill. And he was killed by the British. and they weren't able to retrieve his body until after the siege of Boston was over. And they could only identify the body because Paul Revere had made his false teeth. So,
Does the name Kendall ring a bell as far as Breeds Hill or the Battle of Bunker Hill?
no, I could look it up.
Yeah. Well,
Last name Kendall?
Yeah, Kendall. And the Kendall family that I knew of people,
From
and I
Marlboro?
bought an artifact. No, they were living in Wellesley.
Oh, well, yeah.
Close enough to,
Yeah.
Boston, so it sounds
There is a
reasonable.
site online, but it's very sketchy, because remember, it only had 2 guys from Marlboro listed on it,
Yeah,
and we know there were 50, at least 58, including the officers.
yeah.
So,
This Kendall, he was on the early organized Mass State Police uniform branch and retired from the state police
Oh,
in 1940, I think it was,
Yeah.
just before Pearl Harbor. He was the last captain of what they call the Protector, who was a rum runner patrol boat up in the North Shore during Prohibition era. And because of his experience as the captain of that patrol operation and the boat, he was able to get a job. Of course, the Navy was looking for experienced people during
Yeah.
World War II, recruiting anybody. He was beyond, the normal recruiting age, but they snapped him up in a minute and made him a senior NCO, and he finished out the war in the Navy as a chief petty officer.
so his ancestor would have been at the Battle of Bunker Hill, you think?
I don't know, because I have an artifact from
Oh, okay.
Cliff Kendall's estate that supposedly is purported to have come from the Battle of Bunker Hill. A British officer's short sword, which is in Newman's book. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
arms and of the Revolution, but
It-
it's in there.
You know who could have told you that Joel Bowie, that used to be at Skinner's, but he's got a consulting business by himself now.
Yeah.
Send me a picture of it. I have a friend who was the curator of the Museum of the American Revolution. I'll send-
What's his name?
Who?
The
Joel Bowie. He's an expert in Revolutionary War arms.
I think I've got his name at home.
Yeah, he used to work at Skinner's to do all the appraisals and all that.
Yeah, that same guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll contact him and return.
But send me a picture of it, and I'll send it to my friend.
Yeah, I'd actually like to see him because I have a couple of muskets too from the same period. One is a 1793 land patent tower,
Yeah.
and the other one is a 1812. No, the first one is a 1790 Brown Bess, third land pattern, and the other one is an 1812 tower, both British guns.
Yeah. Oh, I should tell everybody, I don't know how many of you went to the exhibits at the library last year in Marlboro. Anybody? Okay. Well, we did three-day exhibits at the library. We have donors who donated to us actual Revolutionary War documents and manuscripts. And we're going to do it again in April, May, and June this year. First one will be retrospective, so a lot of the stuff that, if you wanted to see that kind of stuff, will be repeated this year. And then we'll end up with, the last one will end up with things that happened right after the war, like the Constitution, Shays' Rebellion, and maybe the War of 1812, which is the Second American Revolution. But we're going to have lots and lots and lots of stuff. We actually have a donor who has, I don't know if you ever see Donald Trump. He's got the big Declaration of Independence in his office with the curtains on it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have one of those. But we don't have the curtains yet. We'll have some made. It was a big hit last year, because those things, there were only 500 of them printed, and they think there may be only around 200 or 300 left now, and they used to sell for $2,000. This year, the last one that was sold was at the old print shop in New York. It sold for $87,000. Because it's an exact, John Quincy Adams sent to England to have William Stone, the engraver, come over here to do it. And he had 200 of the declarations printed for 1826, as presents to give to, Army generals, members of the Revolution who were still alive, and, big deal people. And then Peter Force, a publisher, put together 9 gigantic, big volumes of everything he could find that was done during the Revolutionary War. And he asked the Treasury for permission to have copies of the same impression from the stone, the lithographic stone that was used for the 200 copies. And we think maybe there were 700 or 800 of those published, but over the years they disappeared, they get disintegrated, and some people still find them in the book because people don't know they're in there. So that'll be there. We're going to have this year we'll have a Watertown, Massachusetts imprint of the Declaration of War against England, which is interesting because, that's where the capital was, in Watertown, once they had to get out of Boston. And a printer moved out of Boston to publish all their stuff. And we had a collector who used to collect Watertown imprints, because they're pretty rare. And the wonderful thing about the Declaration of War is the one that was in Philadelphia, they had all these reasons why they're going to go to war with England. But at the back, they put in what's called the Olive Branch Petition, addressed to the people of England. Oh, please, can't you get your government to be nice to us and we can just call this whole thing off? Well, you're going to do it or you're not going to do it, right? Well, they sent that up to Massachusetts to be printed, and they just did the Declaration of War, and they left the other stuff off because they already had 2 big battles with the British already at that point. So, but that's a thing worth going to. You're going to see stuff you will never see again, assembled in one place. I looked online, and we had better stuff than the Mass Historical Society. So,
And when is that again?
I'll send it to your website, but it'll be April, it's usually the last weekend of the month. So April, May, and June. It'll end on June 27th, so the last one will be the 25th, 26th, and 27th of June. And I think the one in May, maybe a week before that, because it would run over into June if we didn't do that. But I'll send that out, and I think Linda Rennie will send all this stuff out, of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing other stuff too. We're going to have a muster on the 27th. We're going to have a parade, kind of like a doodah parade. Anybody can do what they want in the parade. It'll end at Ward Park. There'll be a muster of militia there. And then we were supposed to have fireworks, but our mayor told us we couldn't. So, I don't know, everybody else is having fireworks, but not in Marlboro. Okay, so, and we're going to have food trucks there and all kinds of things. So that'll be fun. Other things too we're going to be doing. So.
Is that information on your website?
It will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we would be able to share it.
You had a question?
A lot of your records, you had soldiers die of disease. Why didn't they list the disease? What was it? Was it smallpox? Do you
Well, it could have been smallpox, but there was another thing going around called camp fever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I have a set of letters myself at home from the Siege of Boston. Israel Putnam, the general from Connecticut, brought up all of his people. And I have letters from one of his companies of militia. He's an ensign, should be a second lieutenant. He's writing home to Mansfield, Connecticut, to his wife, back and forth. And, kind of a joke. He says, oh, I'm staying in a lovely house because I'm an officer, right, in Cambridge. Oh, I imagine it was. He said, and then he says, oh, by the way, could you send me a pair of white socks, please? And she writes back, and she says, here are the white socks, and I put in some cheese. Okay, so he writes back, he says, oh, thank you for sending me the white socks, they're just right. She writes back, oh, I'm glad you like the white socks. Anything going on? And then the next letter is, well, we had a big battle yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and the guys, some of them got hurt, but they're okay now. None of our guys got killed. It's the Battle of Bunker Hill. We had a little battle, and so on. But then the letters from her start coming up saying, oh, all the children and elderly people in the town are dying. Because it was this camp fever. It wasn't small. She would have said smallpox because everybody knew what that was, but they didn't know what this thing was. And started in the camp in Cambridge. Remember Washington, when he came up, he was horrified by the soldiers he saw? He said they were the filthiest people he ever saw in his life. And they didn't dig latrines, they just did what they were gonna do, where they were gonna do it, and they were all sick all the time. So first thing he did was police the camp, and make sure they had latrines and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, that's how it got started, I assume. And think of the poor British, locked in Boston, they must have been sick.
I believe in those days too, they had a disease going around, which nowadays we call dysentery,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
took a lot of lives.
Well, that was camp fever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
That's the one that the woman wrote about that took place in Marlborough in 1775, which is when it started, they're dying of dysentery.
so was that an embarrassment? You didn't want to include that in the record if the person died of that?
Well, no, they may not know. I mean,
Okay.
you know, this thing about Titus just says he died, because they just want to know that he's dead, he's not on the
Okay.
roll anymore, and he can't be getting paid, so. But I saw one letter, I think it might have been about Moses, because Moses wasn't married evidently, and we can't find any people back here, and it's being sent to the general down there, who is from New England, I keep forgetting his name, but the colonel is sending a letter to him, and he says, oh, Moses Roberts died, and one of the other ones, and he doesn't say the good news, but he said, it's fortunate that there are no people from Moses Roberts that we have to send any money to. We can keep that for ourselves. So, not nice. Anybody else? Great, thanks a lot.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.